You know that feeling, right? Your doctor says you need a scan, and suddenly there's that little knot in your stomach that has nothing to do with why you're even there. Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're going to untangle that feeling by separating the hard facts from the wild fantasies when it comes to medical scans.
Yeah, if your hand just shot up, trust me, you are in very, very good company. Whether it's the thought of the big machine, the noise, or just the whole unknown of it all, feeling a little bit on edge is a totally normal reaction.
In fact, this feeling is so common, there's a name for it: scan anxiety. And what's wild is that a huge chunk of it is fueled by myths and misinformation that have been floating around for years. So in this explainer, we're going to take solid research and data and bust these myths one by one. So here's our game plan. We're going to kick things off with the big one, radiation. Then we'll get into what really happens with things like implants and tattoos. We'll even talk about the scanning experience itself, what it's really like. We'll also cover those super important questions about pregnancy and kids, and then we'll wrap it all up with the key facts you need to walk away with.
All right, let's dive right in with radiation. This is probably the #1 source of fear, and honestly, it usually comes from one simple misunderstanding: this idea that all medical scans are pretty much the same. But that could not be further from the truth. Okay, so this is the most important thing to know right off the bat. MRI and ultrasound scans do not use ionizing radiation. Zero. Zilch. That's the type of energy people worry about. Instead, they use things like magnetic fields and sound waves. Now, on the other side, you've got X-rays, CT scans, and PET scans. They do use ionizing radiation, but we're talking about very, very low and highly controlled doses to get those images. It's a huge difference.
And for those scans that do use radiation, we have to put it into perspective. This quote really says it all. We are exposed to tiny amounts of background radiation every single day, just living on planet Earth. It comes from the sun, the soil, even some building materials. A single dental X-ray actually gives you less radiation exposure than what you get just walking around on an average day. This chart shows it perfectly. Take a look at this pie chart from 2006. Even with all the medical scans we do, natural background radiation from stuff like radon gas in the ground still made up the biggest piece of the pie for the average person. So, medical radiation is just one small part of a much, much bigger picture. So why do we see all these scary headlines? Well, it's because the science of estimating risk from these super low doses is really tricky. A lot of the risk models are actually based on data from atomic bomb survivors, people who got a massive single blast of radiation. That is a completely different universe from a targeted, low-dose medical scan. These models also use a pretty controversial idea that any amount of radiation is harmful, which leads to what a major study called highly speculative conclusions. Okay, now that we've cleared up some things about the machines, what about the stuff on or, well, in our bodies? Let's tackle some of those common myths about implants, tattoos, and the contrast dyes they sometimes use. This is a big one. It's the classic fear, right? The idea that the super powerful magnet in an MRI is going to heat up your metal hip replacement like a hot pocket or just pull a surgical screw right out. But is there any truth to it? Well, researchers decided to just bust this myth once and for all. They took 13 of the most common metal orthopedic implants, you can see them here, things like screws, rods, joint replacements, and they stuck them inside both standard and extra powerful MRI machines for a full 27 minutes just to see what would happen. And the results? They are crystal clear. Just look at this table. The maximum temperature change they saw was 1 degree Celsius or less. That's basically nothing. And as for the implant moving? None. Zero. Not a millimeter. The study proved that for these common implants, an MRI is perfectly safe. And you know what? The same goes for these other concerns. Worried about your tattoos? The data shows that fewer than 1% of people with tattoos report any issues at all, and it's usually just a tiny bit of warming. And those contrast dyes they use to make the picture sharper? They are considered very, very safe, with serious side effects being extremely rare. So we've covered the science and the physics, but what about the actual real-life experience of being in the scanner? For a lot of people, the fear isn't about radiation. It's about feeling trapped or uncomfortable in that tube. But here is the most important part. You have options, and you have a lot more control than you think. First, just talk to the staff beforehand. Trust me, they've heard it all, and they're there to help. Second, ask about different machines. A lot of places now have what they call wide-bore or even completely open MRI scanners that are way less confining. You can also ask for extra cushions to get comfortable, and a big one, ask for headphones with music to help you tune out the noise. Okay, let's move on to a really important area of concern. What do the facts actually say about the safety of scans when you're pregnant or for young children?
And the evidence here is incredibly reassuring. For pregnancy, there is no evidence that MRIs cause any harm to the mother or the baby, and ultrasounds are considered totally safe. Even dental x-rays are fine. The radiation doesn't hang around in your body. And it's the same story for kids. Dental x-rays don't affect development. In fact, scans can be a huge benefit by catching problems early. For doctors, the number one rule is always to use the absolute lowest dose possible to get the information they need.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground here, from the physics of radiation all the way to the feeling of being in the machine. So let's boil it all down to the most important things you need to remember. If you only remember a few things from our chat today, let it be these. First, not all scans are the same. MRIs and ultrasounds are totally radiation-free. Second, the risks from the scans that do use radiation are often blown way out of proportion. Third, that scary myth about your metal implant getting hot or flying across the room, it's been scientifically busted. And finally, and maybe most importantly, you have options and the power to make your experience more comfortable. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Armed with these facts, the next time a scan is part of your health journey, you can walk in there with confidence, not anxiety. So think about it. What's one question you now feel more empowered to ask your doctor to make sure you get the absolute best care?